to move on. And good afternoon, everybody else, and welcome for joining us. We've got quite a few people in. George, we've got quite a few questions. Just a little bit of housekeeping, everybody. We try and answer the questions as best we can. We can't go into personal detail because we have to protect our medical advisory, and we also have to protect you, because no doctor can ever answer anything personal without absolute complete detail, and that's not available in a few lines on a piece of paper. So we will get through as much as we can. They will be general, but I hope all these questions and answers help. Oh, and I forgot to say I'm Collette, in case if you didn't know. Right, okay, so I think I've seen this one before, George. Can stress levels cause your liver test to spike? I've had a big spike around the time of a period of stress and was wondering if this could be the cause.
Yes, I don't. So I think the straightforward answer to that is no.
Yeah.
That would be unlikely for it to directly cause any changes in the behavior of the PBC, the liver tests, for example. But there are many indirect ways that stress could potentially affect the numbers. It might be that due to stress that somebody happens, that their diet changes, for example, and they're not eating quite as healthily as they previously were. Or it could be that they happen to be drinking a little bit more alcohol than they previously were, or that they're forgetting inadvertently to take some of the medication, and so on and so forth. So whilst I don't think we can really say that stress has a direct impact on PBC. We would have to accept that that stress can have a whole range of effects on the body, and that might play into a change in the disease.
I think that's pretty fair, actually, because when I speak to people on the helpline, quite often they're stressed, and then they tell me things, then you realise, that they have changed some of their habits and not doing some of the things that they have been doing. Okay, thanks, George. So we have the next one is a 78-year-old male, and he was diagnosed with PBC in 2023, and he's on Urso. He was diagnosed with AIH this summer, so he's on prednisolone 30 milligrams. Does my AIH make my PBC more aggressive, or are they two different entities and do not affect each other?
Well, yeah, I mean, this question has taxed a lot of people for a lot of time, actually. And it depends a little bit on who you ask. I think many of us these days would probably not really see, historically, let's take a historical view of this. Historically, we use this term called PBC autoimmune hepatitis overlap syndrome, which describes really what this person asking the question has. It is a person who has all of the hallmarks of PBC, and then at the same time or sequentially develops all of the hallmarks of autoimmune hepatitis. That the term PBC autoimmune hepatitis overlap was used to describe that, and the practical implication was that the person needed treatment for both conditions. So they get ursodeoxycholic acid for the PBC, and they get steroids followed by a steroid-sparing agent.
Which is exactly what he's on, and he's actually saying, do steroids make my PBC better? Which is part of his question.
Well, no, but this is the point, actually, is that implies that term PBC autoimmune hepatitis overlap, in a sense, it implies that it's a sort of distinct condition of its own. So you've got PBC, and then you've got overlap, and then you've got autoimmune hepatitis. And I don't know that we necessarily believe that any longer. I think we probably accept that there is a little bit of a continuum in the autoimmune liver diseases. So PBC at one extreme, autoimmune hepatitis at the other extreme, and then some, with variable amounts of autoimmune hepatitis present. And there will be some people who end up with features of both. And therefore, we tend to use the slightly more flexible term these days of PBC with features of autoimmune hepatitis. The practical implications.
Okay. I didn't know that, George. Okay.
Yeah. Now, in terms of does it make the overall condition more severe? Sort of. People with PBC with features of autoimmune hepatitis do seem to have slightly worse outcomes statistically at a population level. So I guess we would have to say the honest answer to the question is that yes, having autoimmune hepatitis does identify a slightly higher risk group. But at an individual level, if the PBC element of the disease has responded well to treatment with ursodeoxycholic acid, and if the autoimmune hepatitis element of the disease ultimately responds well to the treatments, and all of the biochemistry settles down, and all of the other markers of disease progression are stable, then we would say that this patient has got a perfectly good outcome.
Good. He says, how common is my combination being male, old, no, 70, it's not old, old with these two autoimmune conditions? I don't know that we know the answer to that, would we, James? George, sorry.
Yeah, no, we don't. I mean, that gets a little bit complicated to try and understand.
Okay, so we move on. So there's two parts to this question, and if you're okay, I'll dive into the second part, but I'll read it all out. This person has hard white lumps on the rims of their eyes. They also water badly to the point of tears running down my face. Are these symptoms associated with PBC? If so, is there a treatment for this? I would be grateful for feedback. Okay, if I made George just say about the eyes, watery, runny eyes are one of the first indications of dry eye syndrome, Sika syndrome. Did you know that? Sjogren's syndrome. Did you know that, George? They run.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and so the answer is you've got two sets of tears in your eyes, and sometimes you have Sika syndrome, one set doesn't work, and that's the set that when you blink and you open your eye, fluid cleans the surface of your eye. You'll be able to cry okay, and your eyes will water in the wind. But I would go and see an ophthalmic person. Boots do them very well, and they will get you organised in some drops for your eyes, believe it or not. So speak to your optician first of all. George?
Yeah, I agree, actually. So I think this person is probably describing two different features that are associated with PBC.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The watery eyes probably are the first stages of dry eye.
Yeah.
And as you say, lubricating eye drops will probably be helpful for that. But I agree, it would be worth seeing the optician to be sure. Mm-hmm. And the second condition that the patient is probably describing is xanthelasma, little collections of cholesterol, which can happen in people who've got PBC with marked cholestasis. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we can't be sure because the person is not in front of us. We're unable to examine the person. So I think realistically, it's a very individual question, and the strict advice is that this person must now go and see their doctor in order to get a clear-cut diagnosis. But I would guess that this is dry eye and xanthelasma, both of which can be associated with PBC.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one, I'm going to hog it a bit, George. Is there any advice on diet and foods to avoid when you have a diagnosis of PBC? Okay, so I'm speaking to you as someone who has been diagnosed with PBC. I don't know how long now, maybe 34 years or something I've had it. And I've seen many fads come and go regarding food and diet. And I was pretty horrified relatively recently to hear a PBC nurse say, just have what you want. No, you can't have what you want. Please, please, please drink lots and lots of water. Stay really, really well hydrated, but be careful about your sugar intake, the hidden sugars, processed food. That's, people who aren't unwell need to keep an eye on that, but particularly for us. And you will find, if you are somebody that eats a lot of sugar and processed foods, it will tire you out. If you remove some of these things from your diet, you will find that you have more energy. Sugar, I think is one of the most toxic things on the planet. But I talk to a lot of people on the helpline. I have done for 30 years. And whenever I suggest a change of diet, removing some of these things and looking for the hidden sugars, I nearly always get a positive response. So that's what I would strongly suggest: you water and a really good diet and exclude as much sugar. George, would you like to add to that, or?
Only to say I agree, actually. a lot of people ask about diet, and I think what they're hoping is that there is an established diet which improves PBC, and indeed many other autoimmune conditions. There are certainly some fad diets that you can read about, or see described, which claim to settle autoimmunity. But the reality is that actually we don't know. The sort of research that needs to be done in order to demonstrate that a particular diet improves autoimmunity or PBC has not been done. And it would be very difficult to do that sort of study. Therefore, all I can suggest is that people eat the standard healthy diet. And Collette, I think what you're saying about sugar, of course, is true, but that's true not just for people with PBC, that's true for everybody.
Absolutely.
Sugar is a highly addictive substance, and we eat far too much of it. And we should also reduce our intake of processed foods, and so on. So I wish I could describe a diet that has very clearly been demonstrated to improve PBC-related outcomes, but I'm afraid that research simply has not been done.
But don't feel helpless, really, and experiment yourself. So second-line treatments, preparing for conversation with hepatologists is the next comment. It's not a question. Second-line treatment, preparing for conversation with hepatologist. I think the only thing we can say to that is to hear out what the hepatologist has to say. Make sure they have a list of questions. And if you're unsure, then say to your hepatologist, can I go away and think about it? And we speak again. Is that reasonable, George?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess the one thing to add to that is that there are a range now of second-line treatment options available. So it would be worthwhile at the consultation just clarifying why second-line treatment is needed, clarifying perhaps stage of disease activity, and having a chat about what are the options and which option would be best for this individual patient based on side effect profiles and so on.
Okay. Thank you, George. So my next person's got PBC EIH and struggling with sleep as a result of steroids. I do sympathise. I have read that magnesium supplements help with sleep, but not sure if my condition will allow me to take them.
Yeah. Interestingly, there was a very similar question to this a few months ago, actually. And I think my answer will probably end up being approximately the same. Probably I agree with you that the most likely explanation for the insomnia will be the steroids. I doubt, unfortunately, whether supplements are going to help too much with that. Ultimately, what needs to happen is that the dose of steroid needs to be reduced, but that will happen. So I can offer some reassurance that that in general, high dose steroids are only needed for a brief period of time. The dose steadily declines, and eventually the steroids are withdrawn, and the sleep insomnia settles down. As to the safety of the supplements, I mean, in general terms, in very general terms, it should be fine. But again, this is a very individual question. I can't really tell people what they are safe to take without actually knowing a bit more detail. So in reality, that question needs to go back to the patient.
And magnesium levels, that's something that the GP can check out for them as well.
I think the GP would be well placed to work out whether a magnesium would be harmful. I mean, it's difficult to think of any circumstances where magnesium supplements would be harmful. But I don't think either of us, unfortunately, Collette, realistically can sanction a particular treatment for a particular patient. We've never met the individual.
That's right. So next, is there any information on scleroderma and PBC? I've read that this is called Raynaud's syndrome. Maybe they mean Raynaud's. I wonder if this is the case. I'm diagnosed with both. How do I find a nurse lead clinic? I live in Dorset. You're going to have to go to your GP to find a specialist nurse. We wouldn't know what goes on in Dorset. But so the question is really, is there information on scleroderma and PBC? Again, would this person not be better speaking to their own hepatologist about their own health?
Yes, yes, to get detailed information. But I guess what we can say in more general terms is that yes, there is an association between scleroderma and PBC. both diseases are rare, but we see people having both more often than we would expect. So on the basis of that, we can say that there is an association between the two. People with PBC can have this thing called Raynaud's phenomenon, which you mentioned, Collette, where the fingers turn white when exposed to the cold, and then they turn red and become quite painful when you bring them back into the warmth. And people with scleroderma can have Raynaud's phenomenon, and of course people who've got both can have it particularly badly and need to really look after their hands. But that combination isn't called Raynaud's. Raynaud's is simply one of the features of both conditions. I think it can be a very difficult combination of diseases to have. So I can certainly understand why this person would like the support of a nurse-led clinic. But as you say, Collette, I'm afraid I don't know exactly what is available in Dorset. And I guess this person will either have to ask their liver doctor or their rheumatologist, if they also have a rheumatologist, what nurse-led clinics or nurse-led support groups there might be available.
Yeah, excellent. So next question, where do we stand with weight loss jabs if gained weight caused by ARSO? And then this person goes on to say, abandoned by my hepatologist, saw him in 2023, had to fight for my biopsy and eventual diagnosis through PALS. I'm not quite sure I know what PALS is. I don't know what you mean by abandoned by your hepatologist, but go back to your GP and ask to be seen by a liver specialist, given that you've been diagnosed with PBC. If you refuse that, or he turns you down, or she turns you down, give me a ring at the office and we'll talk through it. But you have to initiate that yourself. Doctors should not be abandoning anybody. So there's maybe been a kink in the system or something that's happened. So I think we'll leave that side of it, but please do go and ask, and if not, give me a ring. So, but the initial question is, where do we stand with weight loss jabs if weight is gained by ARSO?
Well, I suppose we can approach that in two ways. The first is say, are they safe in PBC? And of course, we won't know the specifics for any individual patient, but we can make a general comment that they are safe in most patients with PBC. And we would not expect any interactions between the weight loss jabs, GLP-1 receptor agonists, and the usual treatments of PBC. So this person will probably be safe to have a GLP-1 receptor agonist, but to be absolutely certain, they would need to chat with their GP or their hepatologist or the pharmacist. Then I suppose the next question is eligibility. Well, the eligibility, there won't be any special eligibility for people with PBC, irrespective of why they might have gained weight. So the person will need to fulfill the usual eligibility criteria for these medications. And I can't remember offhand what they are, but for example, I think tirzepatide is a BMI greater than 35, accompanied by at least one obesity-related complication, with funding as agreed by the supplier. So if this person fulfills those criteria, then they would be eligible on the NHS to receive it. But if they don't fulfill those criteria, then they won't. So. Right.
Okay. I'm just going to mention, I don't know if you've heard about this. I've been hearing on the phone people struggling to get beta fibrate 400s, and so Rebecca in the office, our liver nurse, said to me, find out which part of the country this is happening, and let's ask George. I actually heard it in Edinburgh yesterday for the second time. So I've heard from it down south, in Truro and in Yorkshire, and now in Edinburgh, and it's the 400s. Now, I know beta fibrate do 200s, so I don't know if that's an option. Have you got any comment, George, or have you heard anything on the grapevine? Or
yeah, I spotted this question when it came through, and I tried to look for, I tried to look up various sources to see whether there was a shortage registered anywhere, but I couldn't actually find that. If you're hearing it from more than one place, though, then I guess it is probably true that there is currently a shortage.
I had to look, there's quite a few manufacturers making it, and some 2C or UK manufacturers. So I don't understand really, but if you've got no knowledge, let's just
Yeah.
watch this space.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I haven't actually, I mean, I haven't received that information myself, and we usually do get notified if there is a major shortage of something. We do get actually get notified by the pharmacy.
Oh, you do? Okay, that's helpful to know then, George.
Yeah, and I haven't actually been notified about this, but it's not the first time I've heard it.
Yeah.
And and the pharmacist who supplies this person with their bezafibrate would know just as well as we do, Collette. So if that's what the patient has been told, then it is probably true.
Yeah.
There have been some drug supply issues in the UK for a host of drugs, so it could have fallen foul of the same problems.
Yeah. Okay, let's watch this space then. But if anybody out there, if you're having problems, then drop us a wee email and we'll collate some figures. So now this next question, George, you and I discussed this in Basingstoke maybe 10 years ago, and I was fascinated to hear what you had to say. So a lady, she's been diagnosed with PBC. She's got the ME antibody. I worked very hard to get her ALP. She eventually sent me the whole lot, and I was able to pick it out. So she's not been offered any treatment, and I said to her, what is your ALP? So we got it. And ALP is 56, which is great. And she's not been offered URSO, and she's concerned. But I would like your comment on that, George.
Yeah, yes. I mean, there is no need to be concerned, is the first point, because because if you think about it, I mean, the aim of treatment with ursodeoxycholic acid is to get the alkaline phosphatase as low as possible, of course, but we want it below this second line treatment threshold of less than 200 in essence. So if the person does have PBC, and we'll come back to that in a second, if this person has PBC, then they are already well below the treatment target. So is there really any value of being on the treatment? I'm not sure, though, that we could say that this person really has PBC, because the usual definition of the disease is a combination of anti-mitochondrial antibodies and elevated alkaline phosphatase, or anti-mitochondrial antibodies and a liver biopsy confirming PBC, or a liver biopsy confirming PBC and elevated alkaline phosphatase. So if the person has not had a biopsy, then I really don't think that we could say that the person has PBC, and it would be very difficult to justify treating PBC in someone who doesn't actually have a diagnosis of the disease. You might then say, well, should this person have a biopsy to determine whether they truly have PBC and then decide on treatment? And I would say actually that the answer to that is no, because once again, people whose alkaline phosphatase is in the 50s, well within the normal range, have next to no disease activity. So it's very difficult to see how confirming a diagnosis of PBC in this person in order to go on to treatment when the disease is barely active is going to actually help the person. So I'm sure it might be that hasn't really been explained properly by the physician who has been in charge of the case. Or it might have been explained and the person just feels very nervous about the possibility of PBC.
No, she's definitely been told she's got PBC, but given what you've just said, I have promised her a phone call in return. I said I would raise it, and she would listen to this broadcast as well.
Yeah.
I'll give her a wee ring when she's had a chance to do that, and we'll have a chat, and I'll see where she's at and what they want to do next. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I say, in the absence of a liver biopsy, I don't think actually you could say that this person has PBC.
Okay. Because we did touch on that in Basingstoke, and hugely interesting.
They're at risk of it for sure. They might develop it in the future. Yeah. And as I say, if you did a liver biopsy, you might find some additional evidence for a diagnosis. But without the biopsy, I don't think you could say that it's a clear-cut diagnosis.
No. Okay.
And I'm afraid I do agree with the physician who's been treating the person that actually ursodeoxycholic acid is not warranted in this situation.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that, but I wanted to confirm. Okay. So, this back to the rifampicin, this lady's itch is just horrendous. I was chatting to her on the phone, and she'd asked me, "Is there any update on the fact?" There's 2 questions. Is there any update on the rifampicin availability in the UK?
No.
I know people are talking about looking at it, but I know of nothing. George, do you?
Yeah. No, unfortunately, there's no positive updates. And it's not just a national shortage, actually, it's an international shortage.
It's international, right? Okay,
So,
George. I didn't know that. Right, okay. In the meantime, so she's been prescribed Collette gel tablets, 6 a day. And I wondered, and she was saying 6 a day, you know, I don't know how to do this. I'm not meant to have it with food. And she says, I've just not got enough hours in the day. I wondered, is this a tablet form of Questran, cholestyramine, the powders?
Yeah, yeah, I think, I mean, I would need to, that's a brand name, so I guess we would need to look it up very quickly, but I imagine she's describing Colesevelam. And yes, that is a tablet, it's a bile sequestrant, so you can sort of view it as a tablet version of Questran. Cholesterol.
So if it is, would she not be, you know, your sachets you would take a couple before breakfast and a couple back after breakfast, and then got on with your day, and you can take your the other pills later on. If it is the same thing, could you do that? Say 3 before breakfast, 3 before breakfast?
Yes, I mean I mean, again, unfortunately, we probably don't have quite enough information in order to give really good advice here.
Yeah.
The issue isn't usually taking it with food. The issue usually is taking it with other medications. Because it binds the other medications in the gut and prevents them from being absorbed and prevents them from being useful. And it can be quite tricky if you've got medications 3 times a day, for example. It can be quite tricky to find a time in the day when you can safely take your Colesevelam or Questran.
I think, given that she's obviously got an on-the-ball consultant here, because given her rifampicin and all that stuff, I think we should maybe get her to go back and ask and check with her consultant what his best advice would be, and if she explains all the other medication she has to take. Would that be reasonable?
Well, yes. I mean, either you're going to speak to the consultant or speak, in fact, to the pharmacist, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the pharmacist might be able to say, well, you can take these ones at this time, these ones at this time, and so on. And that frees you up for some tablets at 11 o'clock in the morning, for example.
That is a good idea, because I think pharmacists and physiotherapists are most underused disciplines in this country, and I love them both. I think they're fabulous. You know, my physio, her husband's a doctor, and she says doctors save lives and physios make it worthwhile.
No, I agree. But,
So,
I'm not sure I don't know where pharmacies fit into that, but they certainly are incredibly useful.
They're clever, highly qualified people.
Exactly, and I think they would probably have the answer to this particular question.
Right. Sorry, I'm just taking a note of it, George. I'm old and my memory doesn't work so well. Okay, so this person they're asking, is low blood pressure associated with PBC, stage 4 compensated cirrhosis, no change in weight. It was 155 over 70. It's spiking to 195, and it's now 103 over 54. Who should I ask? Anything I should be doing? I think she has to go back to her consultant.
I think so. I mean, we do sometimes see, actually, I mean, this person has said they've told us that they have compensated stage 4 disease, so compensated cirrhosis. Therefore, I'm not sure the cirrhosis necessarily describes it. We often see the blood pressure being slightly low in people who've got decompensated cirrhosis. So if this person had, for example, got ascites, then it would make a lot of sense that the blood pressure had decreased. If they have compensated cirrhosis, there is a chance that they actually have clinically significant portal hypertension and have just started treatment with carvedilol, for example. Carvedilol reduces the blood pressure in the portal vein, but it also reduces the systemic blood pressure.
Right. Okay.
So that's a potential explanation.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we don't actually know what else this person is, what other conditions this person has, and what other treatments they might be on. I mean, previously, the blood pressure of 155 was a bit too high. So, I'm not actually sure whether the GP, for example, has already introduced something to bring that down, and perhaps it's over medicated.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid I don't have the whole answer, but
no, but they could be using a machine at home and batteries run down in machines. I've seen that happen before, you know.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid this person might need to chat with their GP or their liver doctor to just tease that one out.
Right, great. So question, diagnosed April this year and not seen a consultant yet. It can take up to 6 months, 9 months, can't it? In general, can Imodium instance be taken to have diarrhea? Many thanks. I think we can take Imodium, can't we?
Yes, that's usually okay. It depends a little bit on the stage of the liver disease. If someone had very advanced liver disease, you might be a bit worried about causing constipation.
Yeah.
But I think that if this person had very advanced liver disease, decompensated liver disease, they probably would have been referred urgently. They clearly haven't been referred urgently. They've been referred as a routine referral. So on the basis of that, they're probably safe to take Imodium.
Yeah.
That said, if they need Imodium because of a change in bowel habit,
that's different.
Well, that's that needs to be flagged to the GP. And I sort of stress that because if this is not a change in bowel habit and they've been merrily using Imodium for a long period of time, I suspect that the question wouldn't have arisen. So any change in bowel habit that needs to be alerted to the GP.
Yeah. I'm always saying to people, any new symptoms, go and see your GP and don't just assume it's always your PBC, because we get other things as well. Okay, so we are on this lady's in East 75-year-old lady's in East Yorkshire. She was diagnosed with PBC in 2003. My GP disavows all knowledge of the condition and referred me to a consultant. Well, that's the best and correct thing to do. And she's seen various consultants, the last time August 25. She's on the correct dose of Urso, and then she was diagnosed with high blood pressure in early 2024 and take medication. My BMI is 26 and I'm labelled as hypertensive and diagnosed with high cholesterol, and she's opted not to take statins, which is her choice. Is taking plant sterols contraindicated for PBC? I read that they can block the effects of LDL cholesterol and thus lead to a reduction in arteriosclerosis.
I'm not aware of any contraindication in PBC. I mean, no, I think we can probably say with a reasonable degree of certainty that actually they're probably fine to take PBC. If the only thing is that they have compared to a statin, plant sterols have a pretty weak effect. So if the GP has calculated that this person needs statins because their risk of cardiovascular outcomes is above a certain level, plant sterols are probably not going to get the cholesterol below the treatment target that the GP had in mind. So, I mean, if there are concerns about cardiovascular risk in this particular case, then I think the patient is probably best advised to have another chat with the GP about the pros and cons of formally treating that. So that's one point. The second point, though, of course, is that if the PBC is not well treated, if there is ongoing cholestasis, marked cholestasis, then the cholesterol might be high in part because of the PBC, and perhaps effective treatment of the PBC will help to bring that cholesterol down. So I guess we don't have quite enough details to be absolutely clear-cut here. But in summary, I don't think plant sterols are going to do the job that the patient is maybe hoping.
This lady's also going on a second part of her question about LDL, LPX, various other statins and what have you, and put various charts of lipids, etc., triglycerides. That's not something that we can answer on this Q&A session, I'm afraid. That's something.
No, but we can, because this question actually comes up quite a lot, and I have to admit, I always find it a little bit, and I don't mean to be dismissive or controversial, but hear me out. People are often very keen to have treatment of PBC, and will fight for the treatment of PBC, but are very keen not to take statins. And sometimes the risk is about the same. The risk of a liver-related outcome can sometimes be less than the risk of a cardiovascular outcome. And I always find it a little bit surprising that people are, that people sort of compartmentalize their conditions and are happy to take treatment for one but not for the other.
Yeah, it's quite strange. I know.
On this particular topic of lipoprotein X, though, I mean, it does crop up quite a lot, and I guess in part because people are keen to avoid statins if they can. Really, lipoprotein X is only going to account for high cholesterol in people who've got less well-treated PBC. So, if the alk-phos is pretty high and the bilirubin is pretty high, then I can think we could say with a degree of certainty that lipoprotein X is probably the explanation for that. If the PBC is well-treated, if the cholestasis is essentially being treated by the medications for the PBC, then lipoprotein X becomes a slightly less satisfactory explanation for elevated cholesterol. And you're back to that question about whether statins are needed to improve cardiovascular outcomes. If it's simply not clear whether this is just the normal bad cholesterol or whether it's lipoprotein X, then I guess the GP would need to seek advice and guidance from a lipidologist who would probably want to measure something called the apoprotein B in order to distinguish one from the other.
Okay, I've got a question that's come in on my phone now. It's a very good question. Recommend elafibranor in May due to inadequate response to URSO. But still waiting for a regional pathway to be established to obtain medication. Can I be referred to a different hospital stroke consultant that can prescribe? So this is the hub scenario, isn't it? So they're obviously not attending a hospital that can prescribe it. Can they move to another hospital that does? Well,
I mean, in theory, patients can move around. I think, though, really this would need to be discussed with the person's own consultant, because I don't think the GP could necessarily make that an out-of-region referral here. The hepatologist would probably need to do that. Well, I mean, that's not entirely true. The GP could make an out-of-region referral. But I think all of the teams involved would need to understand why this request was being made, and actually putting the question to the treating hepatologist actually might, who knows, it might prompt a little bit of action.
Maybe that's just that they need prompting. So there's a question up on the screen that's coming through my phone. Diagnosis while running various autoimmune profile tests. An SLA antibody came back as detected, but my overall pattern fits PBC. I've been on URSO since 10th July. I've an around 80% drop in my liver enzymes, ALT and ALP. Fabulous. With bilirubin albumin remaining normal, no symptoms. Does the SLA result have any significance in this context? Or is it likely just a cross-reactive antibody that doesn't affect management? I've just read that out to you, George.
Yes, I'm just reading it to make sure I've got all the details. So I think we don't know what the actual numbers are, and we don't know the other some of the other tests, such as the immunoglobulins and so on. I imagine, though, that with such a substantial improvement in the liver enzymes, that both the ALT and the alk-phos, that we can probably put this anti-SLA antibody down to the PBC, rather than necessarily saying that this represents autoimmune hepatitis or what we were discussing earlier, PBC with autoimmune features.
Okay, the next question, I think if we answered this, and is taking plant sterols contradicted by PBC? I've read that they can block the effects of LDL-C and thus lead to reduction in.
So that's one of the things we discussed a little bit earlier, and I'll say, I mean, I don't think it is contraindicated even in advanced PBC. I think that's probably acceptable, but I don't think that this would necessarily achieve the treatment goals that that the GP may have identified.
I think we've done all the questions, George.
Very good.
Is there anything you would like to add as a wonderful hepatologist and the patient's favourite? They all tell me how lovely you are. Actually, somebody telephoned me. She wanted to know, was there anywhere good in South East England? And I pointed out to her and I said, I know of a young man who's going down there and he's marvellous. So yeah, your patients love you to bits, George, as we do. But is there anything general you would like to say at this point you think might be helpful to anybody with PBC?
No, I think maybe just based on some of the questions that have been coming up, unfortunately, patients may need to be slightly patient with the elafibranor. I mean, ideally, elafibranor would now be widely available throughout the UK, but it sometimes can take a little bit of time to set up the local pipeline.
Yeah.
And I guess if the person has reached the point of needing elafibranor, then some of the other medications have already been considered or even tried. So it can be frustrating, but unfortunately, we might need to be a little bit patient. It is quite a new drug. And I'm sure that those hospitals will be up and running pretty soon.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to just to highlight actually is that that seladelpar now it's not available in the NHS, but people are able to access it through compassionate use, which is great. So
they can have it through what, sorry?
Something called a compassionate use program. So the company
what's that, George?
Well, many companies, when they first develop a drug, will offer the drug on something known as a compassionate use program in advance of that drug being available through the standard healthcare route. And seladelpar is now available using that approach for people who have the usual indications, inadequate response to urso, and intolerance of the other medications. So that's great. I mean, there are a few people who are now receiving that treatment, and that's great news, actually.
Well, that's super. Okay, I think we've covered everything. I don't see anything more in the question box. I hope we've helped everybody. And I'm sorry we have to keep it general, but that's for safety for everybody involved in these Q&As. And George, thank you very, very much.